Hello and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT ranked meta video. Our analysts are here to go through the 11-13 meta for each stage of the game. We'll be covering each aspect of the meta, including stages, items, and compositions. Not much change with the B patch, so most of the meta still revolves around Dawnbringer, Redeemed, and Forgotten. But there's more to it than those three synergies, so let's go ahead and get started with the meta breakdown. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Let's begin by talking about the opening carousel for the early game. The initial component you get from the beginning carousel isn't the end-all be-all of your early game like it was in previous sets, thanks to the 2-2 armory. But it's still an important guideline for where you want to take your early game board, as well as what options you have on 2-2. Overall, the current meta leads towards AP compositions, meaning it's common to look for components that help facilitate that. Rod, for example, can be used in multiple ways, whether that's for Jeweled Gauntlet, Death Cap, or Archangel Staff. Rod also has other uses like Rage Blade, which is used by a multitude of champions, or Shadow Locket, which is still one of the best early game items. Given the amount of flexibility Rod can provide, it's a top choice to prioritize from the carousel. Besides Rod, there's not too many differences between the other components, with the exception of Cloak, as that's a component you generally want to avoid early on. Keeping with the AP theme, Tear can be used for both variations of Blue Buff or Shojin. Shojin in particular does well on champions like Vel'Koz, Zyra, Heimerdinger, Lux, or Teemo. Even Karma and Ryze can use it well, though they do prefer to have either the regular or Shadow Blue Buff. Tear can also be used for Static Shiv, which is a strong early game item, especially on Hellions. That leads us to Bow, component you don't really need to prioritize early on, but can be used for items like Rage Blade, Runaan's Hurricane, or Final Whisper. Those items are more specific to certain champions and compositions, so be willing to commit if you build them. Final Whisper, for example, is a bulldozer item for Varus. Swords generally point towards AD champions like Draven, Aphelios, or Skirmishers. Early on, you can slam several items like Infinity Edge, Deathblade, or Giant Slayer, but you do need a good item holder for them. Kled, Callista, Varus, and 3-cost champions like Nidalee or Riven are solid choices to hold on to AD items. And then there's defensive components like Belt and Chain Vest. These two are possibly the best option after Rod, since they build into several early game items such as Eclipse Cape, Shadow Locket, and Warmogs. Warmogs in particular is a sought-after early game item since it's a must-have later on in the game when running Dawnbringers. Glove is the last component to talk about, and while it is used for items like Infinity Edge, it's not all that high of priority. Still, there's plenty of items to make from it, so you're not in a bad position if you end up with one from the beginning carousel. All in all, when it comes to early game components, make sure you're going into the game ready to play off of what early components you have. With that, let's move into stage 1 of the early game. A lot of stage 1 is determined by the loot or variance. For example, getting a 4 gold opener is strictly worse than a 6 gold opener. Or 2 gold Nico opener is going to put you far behind either opening unless you get lucky and find 3 costs in your shop. On average, you should be getting around 5 to 6 gold and 2 components, with that gold often being a champion drop. It's worth building around the champions that do come from loot orbs, especially 3 costs. But at the end of the day, the goal should be to buy pairs and look for strong early game synergies. Those are things like Dawnbringer with Kha'Zix Gragas, Legionnaire with Callista Aatrox, Hellions, Vladimir Lissandra, and Brawlers. There's plenty of options to go with, just play off of what you're 2-starring and what items you have. Let's continue on with the early game by moving into stage 2. For low roll openings, the best you can do is piece together whatever you can with whatever gold you have and either try to force a win streak by playing aggressively or playing for a loss streak. Forcing win streak isn't easy since it does have a lot to do with luck, but there's ways that you can go about it, such as leveling early on 2-1 or slamming multiple items if you have the components for it. Most players will be playing standard, meaning leveling to 4 on 2-2 and waiting to make items until the 2-2 armory. That's the best time to scout to see who leveled, what their early boards are, and what items they've made. You can usually gauge how strong you are compared to the other players on 2-2 and go from there. Maybe if your board is weaker, you want to play for a loss streak, in which case don't put in strong synergies and hold on to components. If you're running multiple 2-star units or 3-cost carry, play to win. At the end of the day, winning is the best goal to have early because it preserves health and builds a better economy. The rest of stage 2 is simple. Level to 5 on 2-5 if you're not playing for a loss streak, and keep upgrading your board when possible. Now we get into the juicy part of the meta as we enter the mid-game with stage 3. The current meta is aggressive, like really aggressive. And by aggressive, what we mean is players will often roll down all of their gold after leveling to 6 on 3-2. Leveling is normal, almost every player will be level 6 sometime between 3-1 and 3-5. But due to vertical traits being so strong, it's not uncommon to roll all of your gold for that immediate power spike in Stage 3. Dawnbringer and Redeemed aren't so much the cause of this as you do want 4-cost champions for those two synergies to stabilize. It's more about Forgotten, Skirmishers, and Abomination that players are rolling for. Forgotten is weaker than it was in the last meta, but hitting 6 Forgotten with a Katarina 2 is a surefire way to win streak through Stage 3 and parts of Stage 4. Skirmishers are back, and with Nidalee being a viable mid-game carry, rolling to find her with 5 other Skirmishers is also a good way to win. Abomination is a bit trickier because you need Rise, but with Draconic being a common pairing with Abomination, it's not uncommon to see Zyra 3 played along with Abomination units. Of course, you're not going to hit Zyra 3 in Stage 3, but between rolling and Draconic, you'll be in a position to do so early into Stage 4. But overall, the goal with Abomination is to stabilize so you can try to scale better into the late game. If you're not rolling at 6, just be diligent in scouting as other players are likely to roll and you will take extra damage from them. If you're below 70 health on 3-2, it's not a bad idea to roll a bit after leveling just to stabilize your board with an upgraded item holder and a good front line. Otherwise, you can wait until Stage 4 and level 7. With that, let's move into Stage 4, which is also being played quite aggressively. Any players that didn't roll in Stage 3, well, they will be rolling after leveling to 7 on 4-1. Again, this is because we're in an aggressive meta that plays off of hitting vertical traits. Rolling on 7 is better for hitting 4-cost champions, meaning it's good for synergies like Dawnbringer and Redeemed. Keep in mind you don't have to roll all of your gold, but if you've been losing hard in Stage 3, you likely need to roll a lot of gold to stabilize. Otherwise, most players will roll until they piece together an okay board with a solid item carry like Karma, Draven, Vel'Koz, or Aphelios. High rollers get a free pass through these roll down stages since they're often naturally strong by hitting things in their shops without rolling. For those players, they can look to fast 8 between 4-3 and 5-1. The goal for them is getting a leg up on the rest of the lobby by finding 5-cost champions for their boards, which are often still vertical synergies. Everyone else in the lobby is likely to stay on 7 throughout Stage 4, rolling if weak, but otherwise trying to rebuild their economy to go to level 8 in Stage 5. Before we move into the late game, let's cover a few of the meta comps. As we've mentioned multiple times, the meta revolves around vertical traits. But what does that mean? Vertical traits have tiers that go up to high tiers, usually with breakpoints at 3 and 6, though Dawnbringer is different since it starts at 2, then 4, and then 6. At 6 pieces, these traits gain a huge spike in power and often have 4-cost carries they can rely on as well. The 3 most common and best in the current meta are Dawnbringer, Redeemed, and Forgotten. Dawnbringer, you want to hit 6 Dawnbringer with Karma as your carry. This can be done at level 7, though you do want to hit level 8 as soon as you can so that you can find Garen. With Karma 2 and Garen 2, the chances of ending in the top 2 are quite high for Dawnbringers. Redeemed lost a bit of value after the B patch with the Lux nerfs, but Vel'Koz is still a strong carry, so play to find him. Along with Vel'Koz, you want Rel and Leona as your frontline. With Rel, Leona, and Vel'Koz plus 3 other Redeemed, you can stabilize in Stage 4 and 5. Keep in mind Vel'Koz is entirely positioning based, so be diligent in scouting. Another Redeemed variation is called Bulldozer. This uses Varus and Pantheon as joint carries. Varus needs items like Final Whisper and Jeweled Gauntlet. Pantheon can use any defensive items. The goal of this build is to use Varus as a way to buff Pantheon's on-hit damage. It doesn't have to be a full 6 Redeemed board, but it's also not uncommon. Forgotten is mostly about hitting a power spike in Stage 3, usually with Katarina 2. From there, you can use your health and economy advantage to push for level 8 at Stage 5 to find Draven 2, Rise 2, and Viego. Another way to play is just waiting until level 7 and rolling there, looking again for Draven and Rise. Forgotten is weaker than other vertical traits in Stage 5 unless you're getting a bit lucky, so keep in mind when playing them. Also, you need shadow items to use the trait effectively. There are other compositions in the meta as well. Skirmishers, as mentioned, are back. Yasuo as a mid-game carry is still plenty strong, but you need to 3-star him. Otherwise, you need to transition to a different late-game carry. Rangers are viable, but struggle prior to level 8, so having a high roll mid-game is preferred. Overall, there's a lot of options in the meta, but a lot of players can skate by with easy-to-play boards like Dawnbringer and Redeemed. With that, we get into the late game. The decisions you make with your board come to a swift end in Stage 5 after leveling to 8. This is because most of what you're doing is upgrading your current board, scouting, and positioning. Level 9 is just too expensive for most players to invest into. That said, you can go to level 9 if you're winning rounds and have the economy to do so. Just keep in mind that you want at least 20 to 30 gold left over after leveling so you can roll for meaningful upgrades. A lot of the endgame board decisions revolve around what 5-cost champions you use. Most AP boards want Garen, Kindred is a must-have for anyone running Mystics, Volibear is worth it if you have Ivern, as those two go hand in hand. Late game Invoker boards are one of the strongest, but you need to find Teemo and preferably Heimer too. Darius is doing surprisingly well, particularly with Nightbringer compositions and Rangers. But of course, the real challenge in the late game is scouting and positioning. There is inherent luck involved prior to the top 4 with positioning, since you can never know for sure who you're against. That said, if you scout often and reposition every round, you'll be in a better position than players not doing those things. Most of all, just pay attention to major threats like where an enemy is placing their Vel'Koz. Diego is also a danger, so have ways to deal with him or position opposite of where he's jumping. Try not to let your main carry get pulled by Thresh. There's so many potential decisions to be made with positioning that the best advice we can give is to keep at it. The more you play a composition and learn the nuances to positioning it, the better you'll be at it. Watching streams can also be a helpful way to learn how to position better. All in all, the late game is important, but most of the game is decided in those early stages of the game. Look to improve your game in stages 2, 3, and 4, and chances are you'll begin consistently placing higher. That's all we've got for you for today, folks. The meta is in an interesting place with the aggressive rolling in the mid-game and the focus on vertical traits. Unfortunately, flex play is not popular right now, so we recommend picking 1 or 2 compositions and learning to play them well as you climb. Let us know in the comment section below what you're looking forward to in the last patch before the mid-set, patch 11.14. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.